This video is part of the MLA tutorial series. This goes through some of the basics of MLA and more advanced techniques on how you can use it to make great LabVIEW programs. This is a brief overview of the parts of MLA. MLA is divided into basically three sections. There's a startup, there's the loops that do the running, and then there's a cleanup. So if we look first at the startup section, we can see that here over on the left. There are just a few things that are happening here. We've got some initialization if we need to initialize some of our own variables. This little guy here just zeroes the front panel of LabVIEW to the 0, point. That's one of those things that LabVIEW will remember if you've scrolled around on the panel. And in this case, I want my user interface to always come back to being set at 0, so that it's anchored right up here and it's in the right orientation. This is in the MLA template just because that's such a common thing to want to have. The next area of interest is this, which instantiates the MLA object and it gives it some information, such as the name of your application, the version of your application, and then we've got a section for the notes, so you can see the version of your application with a timestamp and who did it and notes about what was in that version. And this is a great way to keep track of just the simple changes in the program that you're working on. These go to the front panel where they're shown up here, the version number and the name. You don't have to show it that way, but that's the standard way that it's shown in MLA. And also they go into MLA, and they're always available. If you go to the About, it pops up a dialog and it's got all of that information in it. So that makes it a very handy thing if you ever wanted to have your customers run it and ask them which version they're running. They can always go to the About box and get that information. The next thing that happens in here is we just send an initialize message that goes to all of the loops. Now, at this point, the loops have been, the queues for the loops have been created inside of MLA, but the loops don't actually exist yet. So this message is just being queued up, and it'll be ready for them once the loops actually exist. That's the next section if we move over here to the loops. So the general rule for scrolling in LabVIEW is scroll left or right or up and down. And we violate this just a little bit, but basically we have setup, run, and cleanup. And then during the run, we actually scroll up and down, but it's just the center part that scrolls up and down. So it's kind of like a big T. So here we have all of the loops stacked. The GUI loop is a standard one at the top. That's a good place for it. This is where all the GUI messages come in. If we want to hit a button to send a message, we grab the message and we send it onto the message queue. The message queue in MLA goes to everyone. So this message that gets sent will be sent by this guy to all other loops. And that's a unique feature of MLA that we'll get into in a separate video of how the messaging works. But this is the way that the messages get pumped to all other loops, and we're able to direct messages and we're able to broadcast messages to everyone that is interested in them. So inside of this will be basically all of the GUI handling, all the buttons and value change events and whatnot that are on the screen that then generate messages that cascade to these other loops. The loops themselves are generally single purpose. There's a couple of example ones here called process and action one that are just examples of what can be done. In this particular application, I've created loops for 3 devices. I have a MUX, I have a DMM, and I have a power supply. And the loops are single purpose, implementing an abstraction layer to control everything about that device. So for the mux, I've got a set command that lets me set which mux position I want to select. There's a reset command. There's also some create, connect, shutdown, which, the connect, this is a serial device, so it needs to do a connection and indicate that it's got a connection. And then the create is actually creating an object. So I implemented these with goop objects in the background. So that's easy for integrating it in here. We don't have a lot of code inside these loops because most of it is encapsulated inside the class for that device. That keeps it pretty clean. And then at the end of that particular loop, we're going to reset the relays so that they all go back to neutral, and then we're going to destroy the device. The other thing that you've got in every one of these loops is you've got an error logger. This is a little thing that wraps up the ability to stop the loop. Also, notice it's got a loop terminate in it so that it's able to tie into messages for shutdown and that sort of thing, so all the loops can coordinate their shutdown. But also, it gives the name of the loop to the error handler, and this error handler scrubs the errors, but it also reports them to a standard error reporting location, which we can pop up in a dialog if we want to, and also, more importantly, is logged permanently to a file. There's a round robin set of files where the errors are logged and progressively marches through the files so that it preserves it for quite a long time. And then every one of the loops has its own identifier for context, so you know where that's coming from. So you'll notice on each one of these that every loop gets its own value of the type def. If you want to add a loop, you have to go change the definition of that type def to add the additional loop in there. These are what MLA uses to be able to create the loops and uniquely identify them. So that instance of that device then carries through. The main thing that it needs to know is for messaging who the others are and who itself is, because there's a difference between sending yourself a message and broadcasting a message to everyone. So that's taking care of all of that. So that's the loops section. We'll get into a lot more detail in other videos of what goes on inside those loops and how to best organize them. And then the one remaining section is the cleanup, which is very uneventful. It's just simply a call to the MLA instance to terminate it, and then to, in this case, shut down all of the errors, rendezvous from all of the loops, just so that the MLA instance won't be shut down until after every loop has completed. It can take loops some time to terminate if they're in the middle of communication or something. So this should be just a second or two. And then if we are in an executable, then we exit LabVIEW so that the executable shuts down completely. And that's it. That's the create, loops, and shutdown, the 3 parts of MLA. Thanks for checking out this video. Make sure to watch the other videos in this tutorial series and click subscribe so you can catch all of the other instructional videos that we post.